Let's see what we've got in the mail today. Yeah, looks like a lot of ads. Yeah, ad from a real estate guy who wants to sell me a house. Um, well, here's one. This is from a college, from Independence University. It's actually for my daughter. They want her to go to college there. Unfortunately, they're a little bit late. She's already going to college somewhere else. Oh, this could be fun. It's from the Denver Zoo. They want us to buy a membership. Yeah, we'll see. Oh, yuck. Wow. Jury duty. Not good. Oh, at least it's for my wife, not for me. Oh, bills. Bills, that's for the internet and electricity and gas. Those aren't fun. Oh, let's see a magazine. What's this? Oh, it's just a catalog. Oriental Trading Wedding. That might have been useful to me about 35 years ago when I was getting ready to get married. Oh, all right. Now here's something good from my cousin. From my cousin Liz White in Hinesburg, Vermont. A card. Says, "For I know the plans that I have made for you. Thus declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, plans to give you hope." Jeremiah 29:11. Oh, it's even better. It's got a letter inside. Well, that is the best piece of news out of this mail. I will definitely read the letter, but I'll take time to do it a little bit later on. Letters are fun to receive. Don't know when's the last time you got a letter, but they're really great. Now, I'm guessing you may already know this, but there are a lot of letters that we find in the Bible. In fact, did you know that most of the books of the New Testament were originally letters? The Apostle Paul, he wrote a lot of letters. In fact, 13 of his ended up in the New Testament. He wrote some of them to churches or to groups of churches. He wrote some to individuals, like Timothy. Two of Paul's letters to Timothy, in fact, are part of the New Testament. Now, Timothy was precious to Paul. The older man called Timothy his son in the faith. And we know that Paul taught him a great deal, probably from the time that Timothy was a boy. When he was a little bit older, Timothy joined Paul in his missionary travels, and eventually Timothy became a leader in the early churches. The letter we call 2 Timothy, it was especially important because Paul wrote it shortly before his death. You see, Paul actually knew that he was going to die. He was a prisoner of the Romans, he had been captured, and he had been condemned to death. But just before that happened, he wrote this letter. I want to read 3 verses out of 2 Timothy. I want to read 2 Timothy chapter 1, verses 5 through 7. Now, if you want to get a Bible, you can go ahead and pause this video real quick. Go get the Bible, and then you can read along with me. So, 2 Timothy 1, 5 through 7. "I am reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now I am sure dwells in you as well. For this reason, I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God, which is in you through the laying on of my hands. For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." Wow. Paul was a close friend. He was a teacher and a mentor to Timothy. And now, as he is facing death, Paul says, don't be afraid. God gave you a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. Now, Paul sounds like someone who knows a little bit about fear. So when a man like that says, don't be afraid, well, I think it's worth listening to him. Now, I am wearing one of my favorite shirts. Let me go ahead and get a little bit closer here so you can read what it says, hopefully. It says, "No Fear Bosnia." Before my family and I lived here in Colorado, we spent 14 years as missionaries in Croatia and Bosnia. And let me tell you, at first Bosnia seems like a little bit of a strange place. For one thing, on the farms, an awful lot of the work is still done by hand. I got a picture here of a family that's working to get the hay together. They are actually building a haystack, and yes, that woman up on top of the haystack with a hay rake, she is going to pile that thing until it's, oh, good 12 or 14 feet high, all by hand. Sometimes Bosnia was not just a little bit different, but sometimes it seemed somewhat funny. We saw some strange things that made us laugh, like this. Yeah, that is a horse-drawn carriage carrying a car. Now, come on, have you ever seen anything like that before? That's pretty amazing. The thing is, when we lived in Bosnia, it was a little bit strange, but it was also a scary place because there was a war that was going on, and that war was between 3 different armies. In some places, Christians and Muslims were actually fighting. And one of the reasons we went there is to bring the peace of Jesus Christ through the gospel. Now, in 1996, that was a long time ago, we moved to the city of Zenica, a city in central Bosnia, which had no followers of Jesus as far as we know. Only 2 days after we arrived, a Muslim man named Nino asked if we would teach him a Bible study. We said, of course. Only 1 month later, Nino, this Muslim man, accepted Jesus Christ as his Savior. And he was just the first. Within a year, there was a church there made up of brand new adult believers who had accepted Jesus Christ as their Savior. Now, the thing about Nino is Nino, partly because he was Muslim, faced a lot of angry people in his family and in his hometown. His wife was angry that he had accepted Jesus, and she made life at home difficult for him, for a while at least, until she also came to the faith. Nino's mother, she refused to let her own son into the house. His brothers threatened him on many occasions and with a number of different weapons. I remember one time Nino was talking to a group of college students, and they asked, well, weren't you afraid? And Nino said, well, of course I was afraid. If my brothers attacked me, then a lot of other people would have joined them, and I could have done nothing to defend myself. But God had told me I needed to talk to Jesus, talk with them about Jesus. So, of course, I did. I have another picture here to show you. This is a picture of Merlina and her mother, Nejada. Nejada, she was a Muslim woman. Her husband was not around. She had 4 daughters, and she lived through a very, very scary period of the war when they could not escape, and they were just sort of at the mercy of the soldiers. After the war, she was interested in learning about Jesus, but she really didn't want to accept him as Savior. And then Nejada met Nino. And she saw how Nino handled his fear. She saw how Nino, even when he was afraid, still obeyed God. And that was one of the reasons that Nejada decided that she would also accept Jesus as her Savior. And about a year later, her daughter Merlina did the same. You see, Nino was afraid from time to time, but he didn't let the fear stop him from listening to God and obeying him. And God blessed many people because of Nino's obedience, even when he was afraid. It reminds me of another story from the Bible, the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I'm sure you probably have heard it. The story of these 3 young Jewish men who refused to worship the golden idol that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And so old Nebi the king was so furious he decided to throw them into a fiery furnace and take care of them. Well, as Nebi's getting ready to throw them in, they had a little conversation with him, and this is part of what they said. They said to the king, "Our God is able to save us from your furnace. But even if he decides not to save us, we will not bow down to your idol." Now, I'm guessing that they were probably afraid, but they were certain that God knew what was best and that they needed to listen to him no matter what. There's a time in Bosnia where I led a Bible study up in a Muslim village. We were there every Monday night. There were several believers there. Well, one night, after the Bible study, three men dressed all in black and with guns attacked me and two of my friends as we were trying to drive away from the village. They beat us. They stole the car. We could have been killed, but God protected us from death. I was absolutely certain of that. Still, what do you think? The next time we went to that village, was I afraid? Yeah, absolutely. But God had given me a job to do. I still had people to teach in that village. And so I went back. Now, most of the time our fears are smaller. Most of our fears are not about things that would hurt us badly or result in death. Most of our fears are just normal things. You might be afraid of falling when you're learning to ski or learning to ride a bike or maybe skateboard. If you play baseball, maybe you're afraid of getting hit by a pitch when that pitcher is throwing really hard. That hurts, you know. Maybe you're afraid of someone who often makes fun of you, is just mean to you whenever he sees you. That can hurt too. And I want you to know that it's okay to be afraid. The important question is this: when you are afraid, what are you going to do? Will you refuse to go someplace because some mean person is there? Will you stop trying to ride the bike or stop playing baseball? I hope not. I'd like to give you a couple of suggestions of things you can do when you're afraid. The first thing, and most importantly, is pray to God. Tell him, "I'm afraid." Now, you may say, "Oh, but he already knows that." True. But he wants you to tell him anyway. He wants you to tell him that you're afraid. He wants you to tell him what you're afraid of. He loves hearing from you. And also, when you talk to God and you talk about your fears, sometimes that already helps you to feel a little bit better and maybe gives you an idea of how you can overcome your fear. Second thing that you should do, in addition to praying, and by the way, you can pray for different things. You can pray for God's protection. There's nothing wrong with that. Pray for courage. Pray for help to do the things you should do, even though you're afraid. Second thing you should do is talk to people you trust and people who will pray with you. Now, your parents are the best, but if they're not available, you can talk to a teacher or maybe a brother or sister or an older friend. Make sure it's somebody you trust. It's good if it's someone who will pray with you, but don't keep your fears to yourself. Third thing you can do, face your fears. But remember, you don't have to face your fears all by yourself. Get back on that bike after you fall, but have someone there to help you. Get back in the batter's box against that pitcher, but make sure the people who care for you are cheering you on. Walk down that street, even though you know the mean person might be there, but bring a friend along. My suggestion is, unless you might actually get hurt seriously, face your fears. Face your fears. It's the best way to overcome them. Now, again, I've got this shirt, the No Fear Bosnia shirt, and the reason I love it so much is it reminds me of something important. It reminds me that even when I'm afraid, even if I'm in a dangerous situation, God is definitely with me. The one thing I never need to fear is obeying Him. Now, what are folks afraid of right now? Yeah, a lot of folks are afraid of this disease, this coronavirus. Now, if you're afraid, you know what to do, right? Pray. Pray for protection and courage and boldness to do what you should, and talk to the people you trust about your fears and face them. But maybe there's more you can do as well. Okay? Maybe you're not afraid to start with. Whether you are afraid and need to overcome that, or not afraid at all of this virus, I would like to finish up by talking about some things that you can actually do. Because God has given you a spirit of power and of love and of self-control. So what can you do so that God's spirit can work within you? Now, I've got a few suggestions. Are there people that you miss seeing and miss talking to? Well, one thing you can do is ask your parents to help you get in touch with them. You might be able to talk to them on the phone or use a computer for a video chat. You might even be able to chat with several friends at once, almost like you're together. What about people you know who might be lonely at home? Maybe you can talk to them too. Our family, we've got a great friend here in the neighborhood. We call her Grandma Ethel. She is 90 years old, so the virus would be very dangerous to her. She lives alone, and she can't go out except for short walks all by herself. So, a couple times a week, I'll call her on the phone, and I'll tell her, hey, sliding glass door, come to the door. And she opens it, and my family and I can visit her from the sidewalk. She's very lonely, and this really brightens her day. Maybe there's somebody in your neighborhood who'd like a similar visit. Just check with your parents first. Remember how great letters are? What if you wrote some letters? Maybe you can even suggest to your parents that you write letters as part of your English or your writing or your grammar class, part of homeschooling stuff you need to do anyway. You can encourage anybody with a letter. It can be a close friend. It can be someone in your church or in your neighborhood you barely even know. You could even write to someone who's in the government, or maybe one of the people who are working so hard in the hospitals right now. All you need is an address to send it to. If you do that, you can include a poem that you wrote or a picture you drew. You can include a Bible verse to honor God and to explain your faith to somebody. Now, and maybe the most important thing you can do is just be kind to folks in your own home. It can be hard to be together all the time. So speak and act the way people around you would want you to, in a way that'll help them to enjoy their day more and enjoy more. Paul was not the only apostle to write letters that ended up in the New Testament. Peter was another letter writer. And one time he wrote to the believers, "In your hearts, honor Jesus as your Lord, and always be prepared to give a reason for the hope that is within you." When you are able to overcome your fear through the love of God, the result is tremendous hope. Often, the best way to tell people about your hope isn't even using words. Often it's using actions. Being obedient, being kind, doing things for folks. And hey, that's the best way to overcome your fears as well. It's by taking action. Prayer and action. So don't sit at home just doing nothing. Beat your fears. Bring hope to the people around you. Enjoy yourself. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I have a letter to read.